One moment, I was just a man walking his golden retriever on a peaceful autumn evening. The next, a cop had a gun to my chest, and my carefully constructed quiet life began to shatter.
The air was cool and crisp, the kind of perfect autumn evening that makes you glad you own a dog. Streetlights cast long golden pools on the pavement, and the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the gentle jingle of my dog Buster's tags as he trotted happily beside me. Buster, my 70-pound golden retriever, was the epitome of a gentle giant. His tail was a metronome of pure joy, wagging in time with his sniff and exploration of every bush and lamppost on our quiet suburban street. We were maybe 3 blocks from my house, a route we'd walked 1,000 times before without incident. It was my decompression time, the moment of the day where the pressures of my job melted away, and I was just a guy and his dog. That's when I saw the headlights, a police cruiser, rolling slow, almost silently. It wasn't unusual to see a patrol car in our neighborhood, but this was different. There was a predatory crawl to it, the way a shark circles before it strikes. The car passed us, then pulled a U-turn with a soft squeal of tires and fell in behind us, its headlights now pinning us in their glare. Buster, sensitive to any change in my mood, stopped trotting and pressed against my leg, letting out a low, confused whine. I felt my own shoulders tighten. I put a reassuring hand on his head, whispering, "It's okay, boy." The cruiser's spotlight flared to life, a blinding white beam that bleached all the color from the world and made me squint. It was an unnecessary escalation. We were the only 2 living things on the entire street. The car pulled alongside, and the passenger side window hummed down. A young officer, clean-shaven with a jaw that was clenched just a little too tight, leaned across the seat. "Evening," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any friendliness. "You live around here?" "I do," I replied calmly, keeping my hand on Buster. "Just down the street. We're just on our nightly walk." "I'm gonna need to see some ID," he said. It wasn't a request. I gave a small, disarming chuckle, trying to pour water on a fire I didn't understand. "Officer, I appreciate you doing your due diligence, but I don't typically carry my wallet just to walk my dog around the block. My house is right there. I can go get it if you need." The driver's door opened, and a second officer got out. This one was older, bigger, with a salt and pepper mustache and a look of profound boredom that somehow seemed more menacing than the younger one's tension. He sauntered over, his hand resting casually on the butt of his sidearm. Let's call him Officer Miller, because I made a point to read his name tag a few moments later. "We've had reports of a suspicious individual in the area," Miller said, his eyes scanning me from head to toe, lingering on my simple hoodie and jeans as if they were a criminal's uniform. It was the oldest line in the book, and we both knew it was garbage. My neighborhood was full of guys who looked like me. "A man walking his golden retriever?" I asked, my voice still level but with an edge of ice creeping into it. Buster whimpered again, sensing the shift in tone. Miller's gaze flicked down to him. "Is that dog aggressive?" "He's a golden retriever," I said flatly. "The most dangerous thing he'll do is lick you to death." The younger cop was out of the car now, flanking me on the other side. I was being boxed in. This wasn't a routine stop. This was a confrontation they were actively seeking. "I'm going to ask you one more time for your ID," Miller said, taking a step closer. The smell of stale coffee and cheap air freshener wafted off him. "If you can't provide it, I'm going to have to ask you to place your hands on your head and get on the ground." My blood ran cold. On the ground? For what? For walking my dog in my own neighborhood? Every instinct screamed at me. Years of training, of learning how to read situations, how to de-escalate, how to dominate a threat. But my life now was supposed to be quiet. I left that world behind me. I just wanted to walk my dog. "Okay," I said, raising my hand slightly in a placating gesture. "No need for this to get out of hand. I'm just gonna slowly reach into my pocket for my phone. I'm gonna make a call." The younger cop tensed up. He's going for something. But it was Miller's reaction that changed everything. The instant my hand moved toward my pocket, he moved faster. In one fluid, practiced motion, he unholstered his firearm. The click of the safety being disengaged was deafening in the quiet night. He raised the weapon, training the dark, hollow eye of the barrel directly on my chest. "Freeze! Don't you move!" he screamed, his voice cracking with adrenaline. Buster erupted into panicked barking, cowering behind my legs. Time seemed to slow down. I could see the tremble in Miller's hand, the wild, panicked look in his eyes. This wasn't a cop in control. This was a man who had lost it, a man who had jumped to the nuclear option because his ego was bruised. My life, my dog's life, was dangling by the thread of this man's fragile temper. My heart hammered against my ribs, but on the outside, a cold, familiar calm washed over me. The old me, the one I kept locked away. I stopped my hand, held it out where he could see it, empty. I looked from the barrel of the gun to his eyes. I let the silence hang for a beat, letting him feel the weight of what he had just done. Then I spoke, and my voice was no longer that of a simple dog walker. It was low, measured, and carried a weight he couldn't possibly comprehend. "Officer Miller," I said, locking his gaze with my own. "Badge number 714. You have just pointed your service weapon at an unarmed civilian without cause. You have threatened lethal force in a situation that required none. You think you're in control right now. You're not. You're a loose thread on a uniform, and I'm about to pull it until the entire garment unravels." I took a slow, deliberate breath. Now, I'm going to finish reaching for my phone, and I'm going to make one call. I strongly advise you, for the sake of your career, your pension, and your freedom, to have that gun holstered before the person on the other end picks up. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was Buster's panicked whining and the thrum of the cruiser's engine. Officer Miller's knuckles were white around the grip of his pistol. I could see the furious, confused calculation behind his eyes. He had two choices: call my bluff and potentially commit a career-ending, life-altering mistake, or back down in front of his partner and let the strange, calm man on the sidewalk win. His pride was at war with a primal, flickering instinct of self-preservation. My unblinking stare was the only thing holding him in place. "Put the phone down," the younger officer stammered, his own hand hovering nervously over his holster. "Now!" I ignored him. My eyes were locked on Miller. I gave him one last chance. "Holster the weapon, officer." Slowly, almost painfully, Miller's arm began to lower. The gun didn't go back in the holster, but it was no longer pointed at my heart. It was a concession, a crack in his armor. That was all I needed. With my free hand, I slid my phone from my pocket, my movements fluid and unhurried. I never broke eye contact with him. My thumb unlocked the screen and hit a single contact on my favorites list. I put the phone to my ear. It rang once. "Thompson." A gravelly voice answered. No hello, no preamble. "Sir, it's Shepard," I said. The name felt foreign on my tongue after so long. "We have a situation." Miller's head cocked to the side. He and his partner exchanged a confused glance. They'd been expecting a panicked call to a lawyer or a wife, not this. "Explain," Thompson's voice commanded from the other end. "I'm on a walk, corner of Maple and 3rd Street, Northwood subdivision," I said, my voice as calm as if I were ordering a pizza. "Two local officers, hostile engagement. One has drawn his weapon on me." There was a short pause. I could hear the faint sound of typing in the background. "Are you compromised?" Thompson asked, his tone sharpening. "Negative, sir. I'm secure, but the situation is unstable." Officer Miller, badge 714, seems to believe he's above his pay grade. I let my eyes bore into Miller, making sure he heard his name and badge number spoken to this unknown authoritative voice. I saw his face pale slightly under the harsh glare of the spotlight. "Understood, Shepard. I'm 5 minutes out myself."
A state-level team is closer. ETA 2 minutes. Do not engage further. Keep the line open. Put me on speaker.
I did as I was told. The phone speaker crackled to life in the quiet night. This is Director Thompson of the Governor's Special Oversight Committee. The voice boomed from my phone, suddenly imbued with an immense, palpable authority. Officers, you are speaking to a protected state asset. You will holster your weapons immediately. You will place your hands on the hood of your vehicle. You will not speak. You will not move. Any failure to comply will be interpreted as a direct act of aggression against the state of a Class A nature. Acknowledge. The change in the two officers was instantaneous and absolute. It was as if their strings had been cut. The younger one's eyes were wide with terror. He looked like a child who had just set off a fire alarm in the Pentagon. Miller, the tough guy, the I am the law enforcer, practically threw his pistol back into his holster as if it were on fire. He stumbled backward, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Both of them scrambled to the front of their cruiser and slapped their hands onto the hood, assuming the position they had been so eager to force on me just moments before. I stood there, the phone still in my hand, Thompson's voice a low hum on the line. I knelt down and scratched Buster behind the ears, murmuring soothing words to him. His barking had subsided into low, nervous growls, his body still pressed against my leg for protection. "It's okay, boy," I whispered. "The monsters are gone." I looked up at the two cops, their backs to me, frozen in fear. They had picked the wrong house on the wrong street on the wrong night. They had tried to bully a ghost, and in doing so had called down the entire haunted house on top of themselves. I could have been anyone, a teacher, an accountant, a software developer. And in a way, I was. I had worked so hard to build this quiet life, to bury Shepard and let the man I was now just live. But they hadn't allowed it. They'd kicked the hornet's nest, not knowing it was connected by a wire to a tactical nuke. In the distance, I heard it. Not sirens, that would have been too simple, too public. It was the sound of multiple engines, powerful and perfectly synchronized, moving at incredible speed. Within 30 seconds, the street was flooded with light. Not the red and blue of local police, but the piercing white and deep amber of federal-style takedown lights. 3 black unmarked SUVs and 2 state trooper interceptors materialized out of the darkness, boxing in the local cruiser in a perfect tactical formation. Doors flew open, and men in dark gray tactical gear, armed with short-barreled rifles, established a perimeter with chilling efficiency. They moved with a purpose and silence that made Miller and his partner look like amateur actors in a school play. The passenger door of the lead SUV opened. A man in a flawlessly tailored suit stepped out. He was tall, with sharp features and cold, intelligent eyes that swept over the scene in a single comprehensive glance. He completely ignored the 2 terrified cops. His gaze landed on me, then flicked down to Buster, who was now wagging his tail tentatively at all the new people. The man walked directly toward me, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the asphalt. He stopped a few feet away, a small, unamused smile touching his lips. He looked me up and down, taking in my hoodie and jeans. "Shepard," he said, his voice dry and laced with an irony that cut through the night air. "When the director told me you'd taken a quiet assignment to decompress, this isn't quite what I had in mind." I managed a thin smile, stroking Buster's head to keep us both grounded. "Evening, Agent Thorne. Lovely night for a walk, isn't it?" Thorne's gaze drifted from me to the 2 officers, still splayed across the hood of their car, now being watched over by 2 of his men with rifles held at a low ready. His expression was unreadable, a mask of professional indifference. "It appears your decompression has been interrupted." "You could say that. Miller here felt the need to escalate a simple request for ID into a felony stop with a drawn weapon," I explained, my voice calm but laced with a cold fury I could no longer fully suppress. "All because I wanted to walk my dog." Thorne nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the 2 cops.
He pulled a slim tablet from inside his suit jacket and tapped the screen a few times. Officer David Miller, 17 years on the force. 22 citizen complaints, 6 for excessive force. All of them dismissed by his department's internal affairs. His partner, Officer Kenji Tanaka, 2 years on the force, clean record until tonight. Seems Miller is a known problem your local chief of police has been content to sweep under the rug. He looked back at me. This rug is about to be pulled out from under him. He made a subtle gesture with his hand, and 2 more agents moved in on Miller and Tanaka. Gentlemen, you are being detained pending a state-level investigation. Your firearms, please. The agents disarmed the 2 officers with a brisk, impersonal efficiency that was terrifying to watch. The mag was ejected, the chamber cleared, and the weapons were placed in evidence. Then came the badges and the cuffs. Tanaka was shaking, his face ashen. Miller, however, had found his voice again, fueled by a potent cocktail of indignation and fear. "You can't do this," he blustered, twisting against the agent cuffing him. "This is our jurisdiction. Who the hell are you people?" Thorne walked over to him, his movements unhurried. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a low conversational tone that was somehow more intimidating than a shout. "Officer Miller, let me be perfectly clear. As of right now, you don't have a jurisdiction. You are standing in a federally protected zone because you pointed a gun at a man this state has spent a considerable amount of money and resources to keep anonymous and safe. You just took a sledgehammer to the most delicate and expensive piece of glass in this entire state. The chief of police you think is going to protect you, he's probably getting a call from the governor right now. I suspect he's being asked to choose between his resignation and a federal indictment for obstruction."
Miller's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The fight drained out of him, replaced by the dawning, soul-crushing realization of just how catastrophically he had screwed up. He finally understood. I wasn't just some guy, I was a secret, and he had just threatened to kill it. "What about him?" Tanaka asked, his voice barely a whisper, nodding towards me. Who is he?" Thorne gave a small, humorous laugh. "He's the reason people like me have jobs, Officer Tanaka. Now get them in the car. Separate vehicles, full comms blackout." The agents led them away, 2 men who had started their shift as kings of this little suburban street and were ending it as prisoners of a power they didn't even know existed. As they were being placed in the back of the black SUVs, the local police chief's car screeched to a halt at the edge of the scene. A portly man in a rumpled uniform, Chief Blevins, scrambled out, his face flushed with panic. He saw his officers in cuffs, the phalanx of armed state agents, and me, standing calmly with my dog. His eyes widened. Thorne intercepted him before he could take 3 steps. The conversation was short, quiet, and brutal. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. Blevins started out blustering, gesticulating wildly. Thorne stood like a statue, speaking in low tones. Blevins's posture began to shrink. His shoulders slumped. His face went from red to a pasty gray. By the time Thorne was finished, the chief of police looked like a man who had been told his entire world was a lie and that he was about to be evicted. Thorne handed him a card and turned his back on him, a clear dismissal. Blevins stood there for a long moment, looking utterly defeated, then shuffled back to his car. The whole operation was winding down with the same silent efficiency it began with. It was a ghost crew. They'd be gone in minutes, and the neighborhood would be left with nothing but confusion and rumors. Thorne walked back over to me. "The director wants you brought in," he said, standard procedure after a security breach. My gut clenched. Brought in? Thorne, my cover is my life. That's my house right there. I have a dog. I have neighbors who will wonder where I've gone. "Your neighbors will be told you won a last-minute vacation package," Thorne said dismissively. "We'll have a detail water your plants. As for the dog, he can come. We have a secure kennel facility." "No," I said, the word coming out harder than I intended. "Absolutely not. He stays with me. This whole mess started because I was protecting him. I'm not leaving him." My hand tightened on Buster's leash.
He was the one piece of my new life that was real, the anchor that kept me sane. Thorne sighed, a rare flicker of something like sympathy crossing his face. Shepard, this isn't a negotiation. Miller and Tanaka have been read into nothing, but they know your face. They know your address. They are a loose end. We need to tie them off, and that means we need to debrief you and reassess your entire security profile. You know the protocol. He was right. I did know the protocol. I had written half of it. I had been the one who used to stand where Thorne was, cleaning up messes, erasing people, making problems disappear. Now I was the problem. I was the mess. Fine, I conceded. Give me 5 minutes. I need to get Buster's food, a water bowl, and lock up my house. Thorne hesitated for a second, then gave a curt nod. 5 minutes. Be quick. I walked Buster back to my front door, the agents parting silently to let me pass. It felt surreal, walking through a cordon of heavily armed men to get to the welcome mat that read "Home Sweet Home." Inside, I moved on autopilot. I filled a bag with Buster's kibble, grabbed his favorite squeaky toy, and filled his travel bowl with water. I took one last look around the living room, the comfortable couch, the stack of books on the coffee table, the photos on the mantelpiece. It was all a carefully constructed stage, but it was the stage where I'd found a semblance of peace. As I was about to walk out, a thought struck me. It was a cold, sharp splinter of unease. Thorne said Miller was a known problem, 22 complaints, a history of excessive force. He wasn't just a random cop on a power trip. He was a liability his own department knew about. So why was he still on the street? And why this street? Why me? It felt too random to be random. I walked back out and met Thorne by the SUV. Buster hopped into the back, surprisingly calm now that he was with me. Before I got in, I turned to Thorne. "Something's not right about this," I said quietly. "It was a random stop that went bad, Shepard, nothing more," Thorne replied, a little too quickly. "No," I insisted, my old instincts kicking in, piecing together fragments he couldn't see. "A bully cop like Miller, he gets off on intimidating people who can't fight back. He chose me. He didn't just stumble upon me. He was looking. Why would he be looking for someone on this specific street, Thorne?"
Thorne's professional mask was perfect, but I knew him. I saw the fractional hesitation in his eyes, the subtle clench in his jaw. He knew something. He was holding something back. "Get in the car, Shepard," he said, his voice now a firm order. "Not until you tell me," I pushed. "When you ran Miller's file, you ran everything. His financials, his phone records. You did a full workup. What did you find?" Thorne stared at me, the silence stretching out between us. The hum of the engines was the only sound. Finally he broke. His voice was grim, and the words he spoke sent a shock wave of ice through my entire body. "2 days ago," Thorne said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Officer Miller received an anonymous, encrypted deposit into an offshore account. $50,000. The transfer was completed 10 minutes before his shift started tonight." The world tilted on its axis. $50,000. It wasn't a random stop. It was a contract. Someone had paid a notoriously violent cop to come to my quiet street and provoke a confrontation with an unidentified man who walked his dog at the same time every evening. They weren't trying to kill me, not yet. That would be too messy, too loud. They were trying to flush me out. They were dangling bait, hoping to force my hand and make me reveal myself. And it had worked perfectly. Miller was just a pawn, a disposable tool to poke the bear and see what came out of the cave. "Who?" I asked, the single word hanging in the air like a death sentence. "We don't know yet," Thorne admitted, his voice tight with frustration. "The account is a ghost, the money is sterile, but the implication is clear. Someone knows you're here. Maybe not who you are, but they know your location and your routine. Your cover is blown to hell." My mind raced, the quiet life I had built crumbling into dust around me. For 2 years, I had been a ghost, a name erased from every record.
I was the star witness in the federal case that had dismantled the inner circle of the Velasquez cartel, one of the most ruthless criminal organizations in the world. I hadn't just testified against them, I had been one of them. An undercover agent so deep for so long that coming back was like being reborn. My testimony had put Marcus Velasquez away for 3 consecutive life sentences. But Marcus had a younger brother, Ricardo. Cunning, patient, and infinitely more cruel. Ricardo had slipped through the net and sworn a blood oath to find the man who destroyed his family's empire. He had sworn to find me. "It's Ricardo Velasquez," I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. "It has to be." Thorne didn't argue. "That's our working theory. He's been quiet for 2 years. We thought he'd gone to ground. Instead, it looks like he was hunting." We got into the SUV, the heavy door thudding shut with a sound of finality. As we pulled away, I looked back at my little house, the lights still on, a beacon of a life that was now over. The rage I felt was a cold, precise thing. Ricardo hadn't just threatened me. He'd used my home, my neighborhood, my peace as a weapon against me. He'd put my neighbors in the line of fire. He'd sent a thug who had put his gun in my dog's face. This was no longer about hiding. It was about finishing it. We drove to a nondescript airfield outside the city where a sleek jet was waiting. Inside a mobile command center, I was reunited with Director Thompson, a man whose stern face I knew better than my own father's. "Shepard," he said, his voice grim, "it's good to see you. I wish it weren't under these circumstances." "He found me, sir," I said simply. "He found a location," Thompson corrected. "He still doesn't have a name or a face. Miller and Tanaka are in a black site. They'll be debriefed, and then they'll find themselves with new identities working sanitation in Alaska. Their entire department is being dismantled as we speak. We've taken every hard drive, every file. We'll find the leak that led Velasquez to you. But first, we need to deal with Ricardo." "You don't need to deal with him," I said, my voice hardening. "I do. You put me on a shelf to keep me safe. It didn't work. The only way I'll ever be safe, the only way any of the people in that neighborhood will truly be safe, is if Ricardo Velasquez is no longer a threat." Thompson stared at me for a long moment. He saw the man I had been, the operator he had sent into the darkest corners of the world, staring back out at him from behind the suburbanite's facade. He knew that the ghost was awake. "What do you need?" he asked.
The plan was audacious, dangerous, and deeply personal. We knew from our last shreds of intel that Ricardo had a central operations hub, a high-tech communication center disguised as an import-export business in a warehouse district downtown. He wouldn't be there himself, but it was his nerve center. It was the brain, and I was going to give it a lobotomy. 2 hours later, I was no longer the man in the hoodie. I was Shepard. Dressed in black tactical gear, armed and equipped by Thorne's team, I stood on a rooftop overlooking the warehouse. Buster was safe at the facility, with an agent assigned to play fetch with him until I got back. That was the only condition I'd given. Thorne was my eyes and ears, patched into my comms. Intel confirms 3 guards on the exterior, at least 6 inside the comms room. All cartel soldiers, armed for bear. "It's not the soldiers I'm worried about," I said, my gaze fixed on the building. "It's the data. I'm going in." The entry was silent and swift. I moved through the shadows like a phantom, bypassing the exterior guards and slipping through a ventilation shaft on the roof. Inside, I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the muscle memory of 1,000 similar operations taking over. I neutralized 2 guards in a hallway with brutal, silent efficiency. When I reached the comms room, I breached the door with a flashbang, the ensuing chaos giving me the precious seconds I needed. It was over in less than a minute. The cartel soldiers were trained, but I was something else entirely. I moved through the room with a cold, detached purpose, a surgeon cutting out a cancer. When the smoke cleared, I was the only one standing. I jacked into their central server. Alarms blared, but it was too late. I wasn't there to steal data. I was there to deliver a message. Thorne's team had helped me weaponize a virus. With a few keystrokes, I uploaded it. The virus didn't just wipe their data. It corrupted every backup, bricked every piece of hardware, and, as a final flourish, routed all of their offshore funds, hundreds of millions of dollars, into a dozen different international law enforcement benevolent funds. I didn't just take Ricardo's eyes and ears. I took his wallet. But the most important part of the virus was a single, isolated packet of data. It was designed to slice through every layer of Ricardo's personal security and deliver a message directly to his encrypted phone wherever he was in the world. As the system crashed around me, I activated it. The message contained only two things: a live feed from the camera on my tactical helmet showing the devastation in his command center, and a short, looping audio file of a golden retriever barking happily. I walked out of the warehouse as Thorne's teams moved in to clean up. There would be no trace. To the world, it would look like a catastrophic server meltdown. But Ricardo would know. He would know that the ghost he had been hunting was not only real, but was now hunting him. He was blind, broke, and exposed. It was no longer a question of if we would find him, but when. His empire was gone. His power was an illusion. All because of a single phone call on a quiet suburban street. Weeks later, I was in a new house in a new city with a new name. It was another quiet street, another carefully constructed life. Buster was chasing a squirrel in the backyard. Thorne had called me that morning. They had located Ricardo Velasquez in a dingy apartment in Bogota, a fallen king with no soldiers and no money. He had been taken into custody without a fight. It was over, truly over. As I watched Buster roll in the grass, this tail thumping with pure, uncomplicated joy, I felt the tension I'd carried for years finally begin to dissolve. Ricardo hadn't destroyed my life. He just reminded me of who I was. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would do whatever it took to protect this quiet, simple peace. The world would always have monsters, but tonight, this monster was home. Just a guy with his dog, and he was finally safe.